Welcome to the Spent to Rent podcast. I am your host, Patty Rose. I have two guests today, and both are named Chris. Today, my guests are Chris Wig, the member of the Willamalane District Board and chair of the Democratic Party of Lane County, and Kris McAlister, co-founder of Carry It Forward and the chair-elect to the Poverty and Homelessness Board in Springfield, Oregon. Is that correct, or is it Lane County?
It's Lane County, and I am a co-director, not co-founder of Carry It Forward.
I mess it up every time. So thanks for doing this, guys. This is really cool. We're here today, bonus panel discussion about the sudden vacancy in the mayor's position in Springfield, Oregon. And so we have a few topics we want to discuss. That this is a very crucial time for voters and for people that follow this situation to be paying close attention, because what happens moving forward is going to be very telling about the next couple years in Springfield. I think all three of us are Springfield residents, so for us this is very, very big. And so first of all, I want to talk Kris McAlister. I wanted to ask you, because as a non-affiliated voter, your input is very important on this, because we're going to see how now Chris Wig, real quick, tell us what's going to happen. Like, what's coming next for how she'll be replaced. And then Kris McAlister, I have a question for you. So Chris Wig, tell us how the process will happen.
Sure. So the first thing to say is thank you to Mayor Lundberg for her 10 years of service. No one saw this coming, that this is a very sudden announcement, and that as far as I can tell, everyone was caught by surprise. And something that concerned me is I have seen on some of the articles, the comments, and the Facebook posts, some insinuations of foul play, and that I just want to put out there that there's no indication of any sort of foul play or anything untoward around the vacancy. It appears that the mayor is experiencing a personal situation that is significant enough that would cause her to resign without notice, and that everyone is caught by surprise. And so I think that the first thing to say is just thanking her for her service, and to say that our hearts are with her, whatever the situation is. We don't know what it is, but you know, the fact that she cares about the city, whether I don't agree with her politics, but that it is uncontroverted that she cares about the city. And so I just want to offer my thanks, and my heart goes out to her. What is going to happen, what it looks like is, and we're still waiting to see a written opinion from the city attorney on this, but it looks like since Mayor Lundberg had a majority of votes in the primary election, that she wins outright. And so that it does not look like there's going to be another election this year for the mayor position. What it looks like is that the city council will appoint someone to serve as mayor until 2022. And that normally the mayor would not be up until 2024, but that there will be a special election during the primary of 2022, the May primary, when there will be an election for Springfield mayor, along with Springfield County Commissioner, state senator from Springfield, and state representative from Springfield. So in 3 council seats. So that is putting that 2022 year up to be a really important year for politics in Springfield about the future of the community. A lot of seats are going to be decided at that time. And so I think that right now, what it's looking like is the council will be discussing, starting in September, who will fill that spot for the next 2 years. And in the meantime, the council president, who is Councilor Joe Piscineri, will be serving as the interim mayor on a temporary basis. And how that works is, you know, the temporary or interim mayor chairs the meetings and can work on some of the appointments, but that they don't have extra votes. You know, if they don't get to vote twice, once as mayor and once as a councilor, that they're going to work that out. And then I expect, my hope is that in September, there will be an open process where anybody who wants to serve as mayor can apply, and the city councilors will, that they will have an open public process, discussion, interview the candidates in public, have finalists deliberate that, and select someone. Historically, I'm told by Senator Beyer, who's been doing this for about 40 years, that in the last 40 years, this has happened 4 times that a mayor has resigned. 3 times a city councilor was selected to serve out the term, and the 4th time was a former city councilor. So I think that the most likely thing that will happen will be a current counselor will be chosen to serve that 2 years. But my hope is that they don't limit the deliberation or the applications to just counselors, that anybody, Kris McAlister and I, if we see fit, and Patty Rose, all three of us, we could all put our names into the hat, the sorting hat, if you will, if that is something that people want to do. I think that having a wide breadth of candidates is the best thing for the city,
Sure.
Especially at this time.
Right. So Kris McAlister, as a non-affiliated voter, not Chris Wig, that I don't want to hear your input. We'll get to that in a second. But Kris McAlister, you ran for city council, so you have now gotten more acquainted. Your run was unsuccessful, but it was a very good run as a non-affiliated voter. Got a lot of support. Who would you see fit? Who is somebody, off the top of your head that you have met that you would see would do a good job going forward?
Well, that's a tough one. If we're taking in viable and what precedent sets, as Chris mentioned, that the prerequisite in our town has been essentially a city councilor or former city councilor, and of the current council, there's only so many who have like the ability to both represent what we have going on and have an eye for the future. We have Councilor Van Gordon, who represents the Gateway area. He was former council president. He is someone who certainly comes to the forefront as a viable option. He's been sitting in on some of the homeless and poverty conversations. He's been talking to businesses a lot. We also have Councilor Marilee Woodrow, who oversees the HSC, the Human Service Commission, which tackles a lot of our community items. We have Miss Sherry Moore, Councilor Moore, who's on her way out, so that doesn't necessarily seem like it would fit the mold. And we have Councilor Stair, who's doing a lot of work in the community and is out of town a lot. And so I'm not sure if that would also fit his mold. We have Councilor Moe, who's been relatively new, and we have Councilor Joe Piscineri, who is the current council president. So they all have strong cases and ways that they would represent. But of the two that really jump out, it would be Councilor Van Gordon, mostly because of how in tune he is with the issues that the community seems to be raising. He was one of the people that really, I think, was influential when the ICE vote happened and the city turned about face and went in a totally new direction than what it had originally planned at the beginning of the year.
Right. Now, Chris Wig, I'd like to hear kind of your input on who you might think would be someone that would be in a good spot to, take over the position. So who would you think?
Well, so my first preference would be that the city council would appoint Mike Eister to serve as mayor. Mike Eister got more votes in his losing council, he ran for mayor and he came up short, but he got more votes than any of the councilors have gotten before,
Sure.
Which I think shows a really broad and deep bench of support for him. So I think that he should be the number one choice. However, if the council sticks to precedent and appoints one of its own members, I think that the logical best choice by head and shoulders is Councilor Steve Moe. Councilor Moe, while he's new to the Springfield City Council, he is not new to the processes of Springfield government, serving on both the Planning Commission and the County Planning Commission multiple times, starting back in the 80s. And so he has a deep reservoir of goodwill with members of Democrats, Republicans, and non-affiliated voters. He's not a Democrat, so I hope that the listeners don't, pillory me in the comments too hard for recommending a non-Democrat for the position. Normally, that would not be my go-to, but I think that he just brings he has a lot of different experiences in government. And so that's a person who I think everybody can get behind, because we know that Sean Van Gordon wants to run for another term. Like, he doesn't want to serve just 2 years and drop off. And that I think would give anybody who's appointed to the position, if they don't commit to not run, that would give them the advantage of incumbency in the special election, which should be for an open seat. And so my preference would be that Steve Moe would be the mayor for the next 2 years, and that then Sean Van Gordon and Mike Eister or whomever can duke it out in the election, and the voters can decide who the mayor will be going forward.
Right. You know, one thing needs to be at least touched on, if it hasn't already, but the mayor is supposed to be a nonpartisan, spot. It's supposed to be a nonpartisan uh, position. So I think that your endorsement of somebody outside of your own comfort zone, I think, is really admirable. So that's good. So two of the things, the major issues that Lane County faces, and as well, specific to Springfield, are policing and homelessness. So that's the two of you why I wanted to come on and talk to you. Kris, Wig, I had talked to you off air about what exactly this could mean for Springfield and for Lane County, this vacancy, and some of your thoughts and what is the most pressing issues. And you had said policing and what's going on with the policing in Springfield. So let's talk about that. And then Kris McAlister, after that, we'll get into talking a little bit about homelessness and how this change in leadership can affect what's happening for the local homeless. So Kris, Wig, we had talked off air about talking about the police brutality at the Black Lives Matter march in Thurston. Let's start with that. We want to talk about that and a lack of accountability with the police advisory committee. So speak on that.
Sure. So I think that, of course, the number one issue that the new mayor is going to face is the remobilization of Springfield's economy. I think that Democrats, Republicans, and everybody would agree that that is the top tier concern. And that's not just in Springfield. That's in Lane County. That's in Eugene. That's in Oregon. That's in the nation. And every jurisdiction inside of it is that we're experiencing an unprecedented economic slowdown in American history. And so that handling that situation at the local, the state, and the federal level is the top priority. Because, when you talk about an economic situation, that sounds pretty cold and clinical, but what we're really talking about is the ability of Springfielders, Oregonians, and Americans to be able to put food on their table, to be able to keep the lights on and the heat on in the winter that's coming up, being able to pay their rent or their mortgage. So it's not just about economy, right? It's about people. So that's number one. But number two, in Springfield right now, I believe, is that the new mayor is going to be inheriting a real cluster involving the Springfield police. That you brought up the Thurston, there was a Black Lives Matter march in Thurston that resulted in some uses of force that, even if they are determined to be legal within the letter of the law, that it is not a good look when you have a Springfield police officer punching a girl in the face, punching another officer, punching a African-American young man in the temple while that man is being held down on the ground, the concrete, looking like he's being held down by his neck, punching that kid in the temple, and that the chief of police was present at the scene on the other side. So I don't think the chief saw that when that happened, but that's unacceptable. Whether it's legal or not, it shouldn't happen. And that the new mayor is going to have to reckon with that situation, that you have a Springfield Police Advisory Committee that, to say that it is inept is the greatest understatement. The counselor liaison to that committee is Counselor Pictionary, who was forced to retire from his job as a Lane County Sheriff Deputy after he stole from the county and the city of Springfield by putting in dual reimbursements. He went on a trip, he got reimbursed from the county, and he got reimbursed for the city of Springfield for the same expenses. That is theft, and it's wrong. And so that's your council leadership on that committee. And otherwise, the committee is filled with a bunch of folks who I think that they mean well, but that they have not shown or even been given the opportunity to have any kind of meaningful oversight of police policies. I'm told that if they get their materials before the meeting at all, they get them either the night before or the morning of the meeting. So they can't even review the policies that they're supposed to be approving or giving feedback on until at the meeting itself. That's not acceptable. And so the new mayor is going to have to reckon with all of that. They're also going to have to reckon with some of the division in our community that has been, I think that it's been brought to the surface by the murder of George Floyd and the reaction to that. But before George Floyd was even murdered, during the last mayoral campaign, the incumbent was sending out blast text messages to everybody on the list saying, Mike Eister is from, he has the Eugene Weekly endorsement. He is this other I'm paraphrasing, but is like, he's like an other, right? Like he's not a true Springfielder. And this is not paraphrase, that the candidate, the incumbent, will protect Springfield culture and values. Well,
Right.
who decides what our culture and values are in Springfield? And what does that mean? That is a racist dog whistle that says these other people want to come and take what you have. And so you vote for me in order to protect that. And that is a tone of campaigning that I believe is unacceptable. And furthermore, that it exacerbates those divisions so that you see police officers punching girls and boys in the face in Thurston. And then when you look at the comments on Facebook, you see people cheering them on saying, oh, well, they deserved it because they came to that neighborhood, and that's not okay.
No. And then I need to double check on this, and you might know better than me, but the person that was chosen to become the police officer to represent Thurston High School is the officer that was punching that kid as he was handcuffed.
I don't know that for sure. I don't want to say that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so yeah, so that, I mean, it's going to be, the optics of this are going to be very, very difficult because with Christine stepping down, and like you had talked about before, we don't know yet. We're not trying to speculate on why. I know that there's a lot of stuff going around and a lot of different things. We'll find out more as time goes on. But the optics are going to be difficult for the people that casually pay attention because, recently Isaiah Wagner led the protest that went to Christine Lundberg's house. And she came out and, they asked her, Isaiah asked her if she could say Black Lives Matter, and she did, but she also said, and all lives matter, and gave kind of a half response to it.
That's like saying the civil rights movement matters and Jim Crow matters, that both of these things matter, and that they're not able to be reconciled. That saying all lives matter in that, because of course all lives matter, right? Like that's not why people say Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter too. That we don't have to, we're all white people on this podcast. We don't have to assert that we have a dignity and worth, and that is something that is a flashpoint in the community, that African Americans and Latinos and other people of color, members of the LGBT community, have not been treated fairly and equally historically in our nation and in our community. And so to say that all lives matter as an assertion that is a rebuttal to Black Lives Matter, that as far as I'm concerned, you're not at hate speech yet, but you're walking down that path towards division and towards discrimination. And so I don't appreciate that happened. And yeah, again, not to speak of the
all lives matter to me. What that means, sorry to cut you off. All lives matter. What it means to me is business as usual. It's like, oh no, things are fine the way they are. So let's not rock the boat. Let's not change anything.
And really good way of saying that. Yeah.
And it's the same thing that you're talking about with the quote unquote dog whistles in the last mayoral campaign. It's like, it's a very common thread in Springfield that you'll pick up on. Chris, you're less partisan in this debate or whatnot. So Kris McAlister. So let's get your input on, some of the challenges. We're going to get to homelessness in a little bit. So speaking with policing, some of the challenges that the next mayor will face, and, the first thing that kind of comes to your mind when you look at the situation in regards to policing and the mayor vacancy.
Well, you'll have to excuse me, but a lot of my examples do have ties back to how our unhoused and displaced peoples are treated. Officers are often the first responders to some of our unhoused folks, and the code and ordinances of our city are what guide their hand and how they respond. So what council leadership, what the mayor feels on certain things is what the direction that the police force takes and what the city and judges take when they are evaluating these types of situations. And so whether it was the fact that during COVID times, when we have stay in place orders, we were still having sweeps. So police officers going and removing unhoused people from public and private places while they're being told to stay in place and while they're being told they can't go to where they normally receive services or get support. So with that in mind, badge cams, they have to really enforce and move forward this request by the budget committee, the support by council, and the perceived support from the chief on actually making cameras happening. And not next year, not 3 years from now, but this year. Badge cams help protect our police force. We are a self-insured community, so it helps us actually help with our own liability. It helps hold officers to the standards that we want them to have. We want them to protect and serve. And so with that in mind, that means that they need to be able to be held to their word. We already have a Brady officer. For those who may not know what a Brady officer is, that is a term used for an officer who has lost its ability, their ability to give testimony on the court, on the stand without being validated by another officer. And a lot of times, such as in our case, they're mandated to wear a camera. So with that in mind, we already have that set in place in our community. We just need all of our officers to hold that same standard. And then it's not singling out our forces, but holding them to that same standard. I think that when we want to say all Springfield, we want to say we serve all communities, we need to walk that walk. And that means making sure that our police are treating everyone, whether they are a person of color, whether they are from another country of origin, or whether they are a homeless person, or just anybody they encounter within our borders, or if they are helping out on another situation in another jurisdiction, as we all often have Springfield police in Eugene and the greater Lane County area doing assists. We didn't make sure that our values ripple through our force and that we show strongly, and a strong mayor who supports those types of situations, who's not afraid to take on the hard questions and go, how do we engage and how do we get our police force up to the 21st century, up to the moral and ethical standards that we as a community hold all elected officials to, and those appointed by those elected officials.
Right. You had mentioned body cams, and body cams made headlines right before the Black Lives Matter protests really rose up in Eugene. And jokingly in the barbershop, and these are my words, I'm not attaching this to you guys, but jokingly, we were joking about the optics. You know, politics a lot of times, especially on a national level, but sure, locally as well, is optics. And I was saying, like, I wonder if it seemed like a strategy that was being made where they're like, okay, we'll put this line item in the budget to remove it, and then we won't remove it, and then it's like problem solved, and it's business as usual, all lives matter, you know. And so I don't know if that's how it works, but that's how.
No, that they, I mean, so how that was a little more complicated. That the budget committee was very, very adamant about that we're going to pay for the body cameras this year. And then when COVID-19 happened, when all the departments were asked to submit cuts, that Joe Piscineri and Chief Lewis say, oh, well, this big expensive body camera, we could postpone that. And that we saw people like legit rise up, that people went to City Hall, Black Unity came over, that there was people marched. That was the first march in Springfield, was because of the body cameras. And you know, I think one of the amazing things about Springfield, just in general, is that people here listen, and that even though we argue during elections, and sometimes we argue during the course of policymaking, right? Like, once the decision is made and the vote, that we all can work together. And so to their credit, the council and the mayor saw the popularity of the body cameras. And so they switched their position and came around, which I don't think switching your position in this case is like something that should be taken as a negative. I think it's just like the ICE contract, seeing how that people feel this way about it, then we're going to represent our constituents. So that was, I think, a really like textbook Springfield case of that this is an issue that is deeply felt and felt widely in the community. So we're going to make it happen.
Right. Yeah. It was just really interesting to see that play out in over a couple of days. And I mean, like it or not, I know that, you know, for people listening, like it or not, but the Black Lives Matter protests have made an impact, have made a difference. You're seeing people get involved. You're seeing accountability and transparency that you haven't in the past, at least attempts at it. You know, Chris Wig, you had mentioned the lack of accountability and transparency with the police advisory committee. There's people like myself that weren't even aware of how this process worked, you know, before this. And so the conversations that are being had, and I'm very open about how much I'm learning. It's like people are like, you should run for mayor. And I'm like, I am so underqualified. It's not even funny. I'm learning. I'm just getting my feet wet, you know, for these kind of things. And Chris McAlister and Chris Wig, you both have ran for city council in Lane County and at different times. And you're both going to get there, you know what I mean? At different points. And so that's, you know, I'm your biggest cheerleader. So changing gears a little bit, and still on the topic of the policing, Chris Wig, I want to talk about the $4 million settlement for use of deadly force.
Mhm.
And a lot of people may not be aware of this. So tell us a little bit about the situation
Sure.
that happened.
So this is one of those things that, I mean, this is a huge deal. This is the largest settlement for an unlawful death caused by a police officer in the history of the state of Oregon. So this is a massive deal. And there's a good article about it in the Register Guard, and it was covered, I believe, on KEZI and KVAL and stuff. But one of the things is, as our local news sources have dwindled and the investments in, local journalism, and one, I think, cool thing that's happened that has bucked that trend is the Chronicle opening up an office in Springfield. The Chronicle has been doing great coverage on a lot of really good local issues. So a lot of people don't know about what happened to Stacey Kenney. And Stacey Kenney was a Springfielder who was experiencing some adverse mental health symptoms. Stacey's parents contacted the Springfield police to say that this is a person who is acting in a way that could cause harm to themselves. So put it on the radar of the police department that this is something that had happened. And a short time after that, a couple of days after that, that Stacey Kenney was contacted by the police in a vehicle and lost their life. That the police officer shot Stacey, I believe 5 times, 3 times in the chest and twice in the head in the car. And that Stacey also was tased a couple of times. And so, I think that this is one of those where to dispel a lot of the myths around it is really important. And so the district attorney looked into the case and determined that there was not sufficient evidence to bring criminal charges against the officers. And that the way before I moved to Springfield, I served for 5 years on the Civilian Review Board in Eugene, which reviews incidents and allegations into police misconduct. And so we look and consider on that board officer-involved shootings. And so, I know that the bar for an officer-involved shooting to merit criminal charges is very high, that it is legal for a police officer to use their power to take someone's life if they have a realistic fear for their safety in the moment. So all of the things that happened up to that point don't count for the criminal code definition. That if officers did not take the opportunity to use de-escalation techniques and verbal judo and lower uses of force, things like that, that doesn't pertain to whether or not a use of force, deadly force, is criminal or not. It's just in that split second moment, does the officer have an ability or have the reasonable concern for their safety? That's something that maybe that should be revisited by the state legislature. And I think that some of our legislators believe that, but that does not mean just because charges were not brought does not mean that it was okay. And that Stacey Kenney's family sued the city of Springfield and the officers involved, and that the end result of that was a settlement for $4.5 million, which again is the largest in the history of Oregon for use of officer-involved force. But the money is not the major point. The one major sticking point of the suit was that the Springfield Police Department has to make changes to its policies around use of force, use of deadly force, and use of force reporting. And so from now on, that those at least once a year, the Springfield Police will have to present information to the city council in a public meeting about uses of force over the last year. That's something that they should already be doing. And I can't imagine why they haven't been. In Eugene, that happens every year. And that they need to clarify how our investigations into allegations of misconduct and involve outside agencies when appropriate. And so, the mayor, after this incident in Thurston, the mayor had said, we'll contract with an outside agency to do a use of force. Well, on the Springfield Police Advisory Committee, Michael Bean, who is, full disclosure, Michael Bean is my boss. So I agree with him generally in most things. But he asked them at the meeting, so has that happened yet? Well, no, we haven't. Well, So have you at least identified who is going to do it? No, we haven't. Well, when are you going to do it? Like, when are you going to investigate this? It just happened. Like, you got to strike while the iron is hot. And
Right.
so it's not acceptable that, it is not acceptable that we have not moved forward on that. And that I think that it is, I don't want to speak for Stacey Kenney's family. I think that they may be great guests for a future podcast, but I think that, as communicated in the Register Guard by the family's attorney, that one of the legacies of this tragic death could be change to the way that, use of force and use of deadly force happens in Springfield, that de-escalation has to at least be attempted before the police can beat people up or shoot them. And
Right.
so I think that is, what the family wants the legacy of the situation to be. That will not ever replace their loved one, but that's a positive moving forward. That is not, I think, not about the money.
Well, it's like you said, we can't speak for the family, and you're right. I do think that I'm going to try to make that happen as far as having the family on as guests. Now, you can't speak for the family, but I can definitely say, what is justice? People want justice when something like this happens. And if it's a civilian that takes someone's life, what is justice? That person is taken off the street so they can't do it again to someone else. So money, any amount of money is going to replace a loved one, but there's no justice if the person is still maybe gets fired. That's the end of it. Now there's this whole justice for Cannon argument. You've seen these memes and stuff, and this is not about Springfield, so I won't go on it too long. But the difference is the person that did the crime was taken to justice immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's how this is different than, the police taking the George Floyd situation or Breonna Taylor, all these different things. And so, it just needs to be said. There's so many memes made for misinformation that are designed to just business as usual. Let's not rock the boat, and that's the thing that we can't have. Kris McAlister, you had mentioned a little bit earlier about homelessness and the effects that this mayor vacancy is going to have on homelessness in Lane County and in Eugene or in Springfield. You wanted to speak a little bit about the subcommittee of Poverty and Homelessness Board, that something big had happened. Christine Lundberg, as the mayor of Springfield, had kind of joined this subcommittee. Speak on this a little bit. Tell us a little bit about that. And so how basically our call to action for the viewers and listeners, pay attention to what happens in the coming weeks, who gets appointed, and pay attention to make sure that this is still happening. So tell us about that subcommittee and what that entails.
Sure. Well, thank you. A couple weeks ago, the shelter stakeholder committee, this is the subcommittee that advises the county and the partner communities on what steps we're trying to do in regards to sheltering our less fortunate and those who have barriers to getting shelter. And so Springfield has been on the Poverty and Homelessness Board, represented by Councilor Van Gordon for the past couple of years, but hadn't been involved with the TAC report, which you may have heard a lot about, which is helping the county and Eugene kind of figure out how it wants to tackle homelessness over the next 5 years. And there's parts for Springfield to have kind of tied into, but Springfield kind of does its own thing, as we often show. And so last month, the mayor of Springfield joined formally the shelter stakeholder committee. So the mayor of Eugene forwarded it. I had the honor to be able to second, and she became a sitting member, a voting member of this committee. This committee is the one that's going to be tackling and making suggestions to our county about what options are actually working and what we might want to try and pursue to make shelter a priority in these next few years for all of Lane County. Now, we have some rural communities that don't get a whole lot of love in a lot of these solutions. A lot of the times things come and stop in Eugene, and Springfield has always been a strong voice of trying to fight to expand that bubble. Just like we outside of Portland always have to fight to be remembered, Springfield has a strong independent streak. And so the mayor joining in this meeting showed that Springfield is able to bring its independence, but also work to the greater plan. And so I really hope that whoever replaces Mayor Lundberg is able to follow up on this work. A lot of people don't realize that Mayor Lundberg in her last few years has been really championing a youth shelter and has been one of the big supporters for what's happening out on MLK in regards to a youth pod being created. Families and homeless families with youth, and homeless veterans have been areas where she has been a very loud and strong advocate and supporter of. And when Springfield was asked to help pay for those ideas or help support those or offer space for them, Springfield was able, under her leadership, to put places in up for consideration for those types of things. Whereas not so much a strong voice for the homeless singles, homeless couples. She did when shown during our crises of COVID and through even winter. She went the extra mile to try and find space and serve those hardest to help. Because just because we open up the doors for somebody doesn't mean that those shelter options are actually accessible to our unhoused. Our unhoused face a very wide range of needs and supports, and not every organization is set up to handle every need. And so juggling this has been hard, trying to keep our communities, our business sector, and our local residents happy while also helping people who have no other options and who are Springfielders first and foremost. One thing that Madam Mayor did bring is that she was one, before Steve Moe, she was the only one on Springfield City Council who was born and raised Springfield. Now, we are open to visitors. We are open to people of different backgrounds, of different origins, and of different pathways. But there's also needs to be a voice representative somewhere in that discussion about what it's been like to go through our schools, what it's been like to try and get your job and lose your job here in Springfield, and what is it like to be engaging with Springfield Police from the time you're 16 to the time you're 30. And so I felt that she was, when all else failed, that strong voice for what is it like to be from Springfield.
Right. You know, I wasn't born here in Springfield, but I moved here when I was 11. So I have seen it through every transformative year of my life. And the 10 years, Kris, I'm going to have you talk, Kris Wig, I'm going to have you talk on 10 years with her in leadership. But in the past 10 years, anyone can agree that by the optics of Springfield, this town has improved greatly. I mean, I did a full podcast with Zach Bassett that's the whole point of the show was basically we were going to talk about, wow, I mean, it's really gone. There's been so many different improvements. Now, it's very important to make this point. The mayor is not, this is not an authoritarian situation. The mayor is handcuffed on how much they can actually do. The city council has a lot more sway and a lot more power. But in the last 10 years, the leadership in Springfield has done a good job. 10 plus years, you know. I know some of the bringing in new businesses to the Main Street area, cleaning up some of the problem businesses was something that was really big. I mean, anything as simple, Zach and I had talked about traffic lights in Thurston, you know, or crosswalks in Thurston, that, you know, how much of an impact that has had on saving lives. But Kris Wig, I know you wanted to touch on this at least. So over the last 10 years, I know you said your politics don't align. So I guess my question would be, in the past, there has been positive marks on what she was doing. What would you expect and want in the successor to continue that path?
Oh, I think that there's huge positives that we are, you know, starting, you know, the transformation really started when Bill Morissette was mayor. That's when the real transformation began. And that Springfield has, you know, it's not just the mayor and it's not just the city council, that we are fortunate that our congressman, Peter DeFazio, has came up as the county commissioner from Springfield and then went to the United States Congress and has been there to champion for us for over 30 years, that we have had strong leaders on the county commission and in the state legislature, like Bill Dwyer, like Bill Morissette, especially Senator Lee Byer is one to just call out, but also Terry Byer, John Lively, that there have been, we've had a really, I think, a wealth of just strong leaders that other cities the size of Springfield and Oregon, not to say this as a negative against those cities, but more as a testament to Springfield, that Springfield, and some of those people grew up in Springfield, some of them did not, but Springfield, I think, attracts people who are that get that Springfield difference, that Springfield way of working together, that we don't want to get into trench warfare against each other because I didn't win a vote on this or my candidate didn't win. It's more that it's bigger than that. It's about the future of the community. And, Mayor Lumberg deserves the credit for a lot of things. She deserves her part of the credit for bringing Peace Health, Riverbend, making that happen, for the first expansion of MX, the up to Gateway past Riverbend. Those are huge wins. And so I think that's really awesome. And so the next mayor is gonna, pick up that mantle. And yeah, there's that, we talked about some of the division. We haven't really talked about resolving the situation of the indoor track. That's going to be a big one about how that is going to move forward. It looks like it's not going to move forward in the location where they had originally had the idea, but that, that picking up that, and to just take a step back from the track, the Glenwood redevelopment piece, because, Glenwood is the most logical place in Lane County to build affordable housing, that based on the land values, the current kind of setup, and that there is a way to move forward in Glenwood that makes it, vibrant and inclusive community. And there's a way to move forward in Glenwood that would cause gentrification and displacement of people who frankly cannot afford to live anywhere else. Right. And so that I think is going to be the number one thing on the next mayor's, their kind of to-do list. And I also think, downtown has got a lot of love, and that I was just with a good friend yesterday who's not from Springfield, and we went for a social distancing hike at Mount Pisgah. Sorry, Willamalane, we promised to go to Doris Ranch next time, but we were at Mount Pisgah and we were talking. He says that downtown Springfield on Main Street is the best place to go in Lane County. Outright is what he said.
For sure.
This is a person who would know. And so I feel pretty confident in that person's opinion, but, downtown is awesome. And now we have Mohawk to make it awesome. We have, the Paramount to make it awesome. That Thurston has, a lot of things going for it. Downtown and like the section off of Centennial in West Springfield has a lot going for it. That's where the wealthy white people live. And so now in the middle of Springfield, where everybody else lives, that we have some work to do there to make those parts of Springfield just as awesome as the other parts. So I'm excited to, hopefully, I would like to help in whatever way I'm able to.
Yeah. It's going to be really telling over the next couple of weeks. How quick do you think a decision is going to be made? I guess, so we had kind of, to reiterate, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Joe Pish is going to be put in for an interim situation. So he'll be holding that. And then how long is the process going to take, before we're going to know candidates? And do you think it'll be public? I guess, Chris Wig, I'm asking you.
So I don't know. I hope that it's public. As I understand it, the city council is meeting tomorrow, but only to talk about a property transaction, that they're not going to discuss this tomorrow. And the first time that it will be discussed at council is on the 8th of September. And that's according to something that Sean Van Gordon posted on Facebook. So that's not confirmed in an official email or anything. That's just what I'm seeing on Facebook right now. I imagine that on that day, they will discuss what is the process going to be. And that my hope is, if anybody listening lives in Springfield, I would encourage you to email and call the mayor and the city councilors and the manager. Well, I guess the mayor. So contact the city councilors and tell them
the mayor's office still exists.
Tell them that you would like to have an open process, transparent public process to decide who that next person is going to be. And that I will be writing to my city councilor, Sherry Moore, and the rest of the councilors that my hope is that they will not restrict consideration only to current councilors, and that they will open that up to any Springfielder who wants to serve. Maybe you don't have to interview every single person, but anybody who wants to serve should have the opportunity to apply, to make their interest known. It's a public position. Everybody should get a chance. And my hope is that that's what they'll do.
I think with the current landscape with Zoom calls like this, everybody has gotten more comfortable with the technology. So I don't understand why we can't have all hearings and all committee meetings public, public information. I mean, I don't see a reason that the city council's discussions, I know that there's some things behind the scenes probably that the plans would make people go crazy here in the planning and whatnot, but I don't know. I'm all for transparency,
Well, most of them are. Like the city council is meeting on Zoom. I don't know what sub is doing. The school board is meeting on GoToMeetings. Willamalane is still meeting in person, but we have a call-in option. So anybody can call in. We don't have video conferencing because we're usually all in the same room, but anybody can, it's still a public meeting. You can call into the meeting and people on the line can give public comment during the comment period.
Now, where's the best resource to find those links or those phone numbers? I mean, where's the best place?
I mean, all of them are on the website of the jurisdiction that you look up, for Willamalane, you look up Willamalane board meeting, sub board meeting, Springfield School District 19 board meeting, and it tells you when the meetings are and that they have to generally release the agenda ahead of time. I don't know exactly what the laws are on that, but they do release the agenda ahead of time. It has the call-in information on it. Chris attends a lot more public meetings than I do. What do you think?
Well, Sub does do it on digital. We just had, I'm on their budget committee. So we did ours via the Zoom process. There is a website. A lot of times Facebook will project a lot of it. KPW and the Weekly also announce a lot of the meetings. The Chronicle has been really good at covering some of the meetings as well. And so shout out to them as a source to figure out when the meetings are happening.
No,
but yes, I think almost everything.
The Chronicle, is it just called the Chronicle or is it?
Yeah, it's chronicle1909.com.
Yep.
Okay.
Springfield, Cottage Grove, Crestwell.
Nice.
Awesome.
I'm gonna have to follow that one for sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this has been really cool. It's really, thank you. And full disclosure, we started planning this episode at noon. So this was definitely impromptu. You were the first two people that popped into my head because you're both very politically active and also really approachable. That's one of the things that I love about both of you is how you're doing this work and you want feedback. You want feedback from your local residents, So it's really cool to get to know you and build a relationship with both of you. I'm really excited to see how this whole situation plays out. And I think that everybody needs to be paying attention and there needs to be transparency. It's going to be a very difficult job to be the mayor of Springfield moving forward because the business as usual stuff that I had mentioned before, that's a thing of the past. There's too many people active now. And that's good, actually, that now you actually have to do some work. Now, is Springfield's mayor a volunteer position or is there a stipend?
It's a volunteer position.
With an $85 approximate stipend for cell phone and parking.
Yeah. So that's another thing that makes it difficult, and I would resign as well if I was in her shoes. No, but we'll find out. Hopefully her health is good. I don't want to speculate or say anything like that. Sometimes when these things happen, it can be family health, and that obviously in a health crisis and a pandemic, anything is possible. Let's wrap it up. So goals for in 3 words. 3 words, goals for the next mayor of Springfield. Chris Wig.
Bring everyone together.
Ooh, good. Kris McAlister.
Hi, see here. Access, COVID, and progress.
All right. I'm going to go with balance, transparency, and trust. So thanks, guys. This is really awesome. This is kind of a weird way to end this. I dug. I was looking at just what song I was going to play, and I couldn't find anything that fit specifically. And so since we're recording this at night, I think I'm going to drop this episode on audio tonight and video in the morning. So this won't make any sense for that either. I did find this song that I had forgot I even made called Goodbye, Goodnight. Yeah, Goodbye, Goodnight from my first crew, the AntiDope. So I'm going to end it with that. Chris Wig, Kris McAlister, thank you guys for doing this on short notice. I appreciate your insight, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too. So this is the AntiDope, my first ever crew with Goodbye, Goodnight.
Everything is gonna be alright, okay? Knowing that when you leave, I won't to pathologic or emotional. Don't know I may act like I am cool with this bizarre, just for show. I fell in love the moment I looked into your eyes. I felt sadness the first time I made you cry. I seemed to drift for the reply. The more that we try, but I think before we leave, we give it one last ride.
All the hours in your bed, there's no more time for sleeping in. This has been accepted. Just don't say goodbye. Say goodnight, say goodnight, say goodnight. People tell
Like an angel with no wings, I cry for you. Like a junkie with no fix, I cry for you. Like a baby with no mother, I die for you. Let's just seal it with a kiss, 'cause I cry for you.
everything is gonna be alright, okay. Now that I know where I stand when everything will change. I know that you see I'm tired of the timing. With all the hours in your bed, there's no more time for sleeping in. This has been accepted. Just don't say goodbye. Say goodnight, say goodnight, say goodnight. People tell
Like an angel with no wings, I cry for you. Like a junkie with no fix, I cry for you. Like a baby with no mother, I die for you. Let's just seal it with a kiss, 'cause I cry for you.
Loving you was easy, even through the night. Though every conversation would end up in a fight. The pillow talk was better before we had sex. Our time and understanding was very complex.
Loving you was easy, even through the night. Though every conversation would end up in a fight. The pillow talk was better before we had sex. Our time and understanding was very complex.
with all the